When you joined this call today, I had a description of what was going to happen on that call, or this webinar, I should say. And I need to give you an apology because over the last 48 hours, I've come to a new realization. I have come to appreciate something that I had long forgotten. And that is, it's really because of Corona. 6 weeks ago, Corona hit, I was doing this work and I said, oh my gosh, I gotta really pivot and make sure that parents know how to homeschool. They know how to make sure their kids are doing the work they need to do at home, et cetera. And honestly, that is not why I'm in this work. I'm in this work for one reason, because I want every parent to become a better leader for their child. And leadership is needed regardless of what's happening in society, regardless of what's happening with coronavirus or pandemic. Leadership is always present, because the way that I have been doing the work and the way that many parents do the work of raising kids is uninspiring. Here's what I mean. There's an author, one of my favorite authors actually, his name is Simon Sinek, and he talks about something called the golden circle. Golden circle. You see that? Inside is why, how, what. That is how all of us operate. There's a why, there's a how, and a what. But when we think about our roles as parents, particularly as it relates to like education, here's how we tend to operate. We focus here on what. What do we want for our kids? We want them to go to college. We want them to have a job. And as I mentioned yesterday, we may want them to get out of the house one day. That's what our what is, right? College, job, that's our goal. The how we do that becomes pretty clear. If we want our child to go to college, well, what do? We make sure they do their homework, right? We make sure they prepare for a test. We make sure they do what's assigned and they follow the instructions of their teacher at school. What we do as parents, we take that information, that what and that how, and we package it and we try to sell it to our kids. And I'll tell you, this is uninspiring. It's not only uninspiring to our kids, but honestly, I'll bet you it's uninspiring to you, and I'll prove it to you. Because the other way that leaders, the way that inspired leaders operate, is they start here. And again, this book by Simon Sinek is called Start With Why. I would recommend it strongly. Here's how inspired leaders behave. What is my purpose? What is my calling? What do I believe? That's the why question. So let me give you an example of that. Actually, before I give the example of that, when you are clear about what you are about, your purpose, why do you have this child? Why did God give this child to you? What is your purpose for this child? When you become clear on that, the how becomes clear and the what becomes clear. And from that point on, anytime anyone violates or challenges what you're up to in these how and why areas, how and what areas, you go back to your why and you have an automatic defense. Let me give you an example. My son is now 17 years old. 16 years ago, I met with a woman who had a 12-year-old son who was absolutely amazing. He was an amazing young man at 12 years old, just incredible. Also, he was a black boy, and I had a black son at that time, and I wanted to make sure that my son grew up to be like this boy. So I sat down and talked to the mom on several occasions, and I said, help me understand what you did and how you did it. And she told me about some of the things that she did, but she said, you know what, Matt, honestly, that's not so important. What's really important is I decided early on that my purpose for raising this son was to make him into a godly man. It was her words. I wanted my son to be a godly man. So once she had that clear in her mind, guess what? How do you help a young man become godly? Well, there's some things that are obvious. One, they've got to handle their own responsibilities, right? That's part of, in her mind, part of being godly. That means when assignment is given, you're going to actually do it. You're going to do it well. That's a how. But what about that? Again, in an educational context, what? That means I'm going to do my homework on a regular basis because I'm pursuing excellence. That is, again, consistent with her why. Does this make sense? So what's happening is we're turning upside down what we tend to do as parents, and we stop selling our kids something that's uninspiring and actually start to move to the more inspiring why question. So what we're going to do today is not develop a learning plan specifically. We're going to be clear about our why first, because once we're clear about our why, then we can begin developing the how and the what associated with it. Again, I'm about leadership, and everyone, your kids, yourself, you will be able to buy what you're selling if you stick with your why. And again, from someone who has 3 teenagers in one room, in one house, I promise you, you're going to get some battles that are coming up, some just pitched battles between you and your kids. And if your reason for telling them they need to do their homework is because you want them to go to college, I'll tell you that is going to be an empty argument very, very soon. But if the reason you're saying, I want you to do your work, I want you to be responsible, is because I have a bigger why here, nobody can argue with that. And here's what will also happen. Your kids, they may not initially realize it, but they will appreciate that there's something larger than college or a job that's motivating you, that's demanding a certain level of excellence or certain level of expectation coming from your child. You follow me? This is an entirely different way to look at education, and this is why this is going to work. So I've got a presentation for you. Let me actually remind you guys about a couple things. There are chats that you can, if you go to the bottom of your screen, there should be a little button that says chat, and you're welcome to start to send me some questions or comments. I'll be happy to take a moment and take a look at them. We'll also have some opportunities later for much more dialogue in a smaller group setting, because we've got 20 people or so on the line right now. So we'll do that in a moment. Okay. So again, why, how, what, not what, how, why. All right. It's hugely important. Now let's get into this. I have a presentation I'm going to walk through with you. And again, we're starting with why. The first piece of this is the overview. We're going to start with the why. We're going to talk about it. We're going to help you understand how to develop your own why statements. Then we're going to, time permitting, get into the objectives. How do you accomplish your why? How do you build your why? How do you create the structure beneath that to make sure your child is progressing in a way that you believe is what you're looking for? And frankly, it's also what the child's bent and natural tendencies might be. And then we'll get into the what, the practical stuff. How do you actually operationalize this on a day-to-day basis? There'll be something I'll talk about starting your streak or what supports are in place. And then of course, things like practice. Throughout this conversation and throughout my work, again, this is called the education game for a reason, because I have found that most parents need a reframing of how to think about the role as a parent. And I use the reframing of a head coach, because a head coach generally uses this why, how, what statements. Why? The best coaches say, I want you to be a great human being. And athletics is a way to do that. And so therefore, when you have a challenge, you're going to push through the challenge, right? That is what the best leaders actually do. And that's what I'm going to try to teach you guys to do as well. So let's continue on with this. And again, I will keep using this language of head coach. So be aware I'm going to talk to you as a head coach sometimes. Now, starting with your why, you got to know it. And let me do something real quick. I want to get one volunteer to step forward and to help me understand, if I want to understand what is important to someone, how do I go about doing that? How do I find out what's important? I want someone just to unmute and give me a sense of what would be necessary in order to pull that why out of somebody.
Look at how they spend their time.
Good, great. Time, and there's another part of that, which is how they spend their money. time and money are two great ways to get a sense of what's important to someone. So thank you for that. Yep. So we're going to keep going because there's going to be a lot of people here. But the piece that I'm actually going to do is I'm going to actually ask you to tell stories and actually talk about what's really in your heart. Because yes, time and money does tell us what your values are and what you prioritize. But when we start to get into the why, what's your story, what's your reason for pursuing a vision for your child, that's what we're going to get to now. Now I've got 3 folks who volunteered to help today. And what we're going to do is create a breakout group. And the breakout room will be, each of you will be sitting with 4 or 5 other people, and actually 3 or 4 other people. And in these breakout rooms, one of our volunteers are going to join you, and then we're going to talk through these questions right here. So take a look at these, kind of stew on them, and then in a moment, I'm going to break you guys out. So hold on one second. Okay, I'm going to now break you out, and this will be a conversation for each of you to join. We'll do this for about 5 or 6 minutes, and then we'll come back and talk about it. Here we go. Okay, so I think we've got everyone back. So the question is still the same. We need to talk through what was the conversation that took place? What were the things that people talked about? Any themes emerge? Any sense of higher purpose that was coming through? So would anyone care to help us understand if there were some themes that started to emerge from this conversation about who we wanted our children to be?
Hi, Matt. I'd be happy to share.
Please.
So within our group, I think a common theme that surfaced was that we all want our children to be more Christ-like. So we want to raise them to be patient, kind, loving people. We want to instill a love of learning. We want them to enjoy school, not see it as a burden that they have to do. Those were the things that we were touching on.
Got it. Got it. Thank you. Anyone else care to describe any themes that started to emerge? Just unmute yourself and just jump on in.
Yes. So in my group, we talked a lot about perseverance, persistence, uniqueness, and being open-minded. One of my parents even spoke about a bridge and the difficulties that are that take place in the differences in your children.
Okay, so every child is different, and so yeah, so that's actually very interesting because the theme of perseverance came through. One of the folks in the group I was in, grandmother who's part of a military family, and again, thank you again for your service and your family service. But perseverance was a term that has become kind of a value in their family, right? And this is now a couple generations deep. And so that was an important element for her. So the point about this all is that all of us have these inner motivations, these whys that are truly at the heart of what it is we're trying and hoping for our children. And so that is really the point of this exercise. We cannot get confused thinking that college or job is actually our driver. It's not. It will not motivate your child. It will not motivate you long term. These other issues are the drivers. So now the next exercise is that I want you to now start to draft your why statement. Now, this takes time. So in a 1-hour call, it's unrealistic to expect that this is going to happen perfectly. But what I want you to do today is to use this and actually start right now and write down this draft statement here. My vision for my child is to blank so that blank, right? I want to do blank so that my child can do blank. That's your why statement. And if you'd like, I'm going to give you mine as an example. Now, I've been working on this for years, and so it's a little easier for me to describe, but here's mine on the right side of the screen. To inspire parents to lead so that their children and their children and their children are fully prepared to lead our world. That is my why statement. That is why I'm doing this work. And that's why I have really restructured out all the things I'm doing right now, because this is really the thing that motivates me. So this is your challenge. Again, it can be long or short. The shorter, the better, frankly. But I'd like you now to spend just 1 minute, and I'll put a timer on the screen, 1 minute, drafting a very simple why statement for your child.
Okay, but Matt, you just showed us a why statement that's for you, and you want us to draft one that's for our child, right?
Well, this is really your why, the parent's why. This is the why statement for you. Your child, as they grow older, they will start to develop their own why statement, and that's part of your job to help them do that. But right now, you as the leader, this is your draft statement. My why is to blank so that blank. And I want to remind you now, as we're starting to wind this down, this is not easy. Okay, so that was just 1 minute. This takes time. But this is the process to become clearer about what it is that is driving you. And could someone volunteer to give me a sense of where they're heading with this draft why statement for yourself as the parent?
I said to raise healthy, educated, faithful children so that they are well equipped to live fulfilled, productive lives.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. Someone else.
I said to guide my child to self-actualization.
Got it. Okay, good. I'll tweak that a little bit, because self-actualization, I'm not clear what that means. That may be clear in your mind, and that's fine, because this is your document, just as long as that part is clear. Great, thank you.
Yeah, for me, it would be like the realization of like fulfillment of his talents and potential.
Perfect, perfect, exactly. Love it, love it. One more,
I'll share mine.
please.
To inspire our daughter to stretch and connect across diverse worlds so that she can lead in all areas of her life.
Love it, love it. Okay, thank you. Thank you for that as well. So what's happening now is you guys are getting clearer about the why that matters most to you. This is, and again, we've talked about why this is important, but this is how you're going to keep this why in our minds. You guys ever know how at beginning of the year, January 1st, we all set these goals for ourselves, these New Year's resolutions, and then 2 weeks later, I usually can't even remember what the resolution was, right? We don't want that to happen now. What we want to happen now is, as you're drafting this why statement, we want it to be right up in front, so that you will see this on a daily basis. You'll be able to, if you're a person of faith, pray on it. If you're a person of not a faith, then you will be able to kind of remember and meditate and think about how this translates into your daily activity. So here's the next part of this action. I want you to draft that why statement. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect, but I want you to tape it to your bathroom mirror. You can use a note card, you can use a sticky note, just a piece of paper or napkin, doesn't matter. But it needs to be on your bathroom mirror so that every day, as you're brushing your teeth and doing your hair, you are thinking about, that is the reason that I'm going to fight the battles that are coming at me today. And as you kids become middle schoolers and high schoolers, the battles will intensify. Does that make sense? Hugely important that you do not let this revelation slip away with the complexities and the busyness of life. All right, so can I get a thumbs up for the folks who are going to do this? I just need you to put a thumb up in the screen. I just want to see some acknowledgement that this is going to happen. Awesome. And for the folks who are video muted, I'm going to assume there's a thumb going up someplace. Good deal. Now we're not done, because now it's going to be posted, and I need something else from you. And this is because this is my mission, and I need some validation and some encouragement sometimes. I would like you to do this. I would like you to take a picture of that why statement, whether it's on a mirror or just hand by hand, and email it or text it to my cell number, which is on your screen. So you can write that down. I want to know for certain that this is moving the ball for families. That is my purpose. So if you could do that for me we'll do that in exchange for compensation for the training today. How's that? Okay, so take a picture, send it to me, let me know that it's moving and it's happening, and that would be incredibly, incredibly valuable and appreciative for me. And you see mine there, that's an example of me. By the way, in my bathroom, I only spend a couple seconds doing my hair. So I have to use other ways to remind myself of this. And frankly, I actually have a alarm that rings in the morning and has this statement on my phone. What's my purpose? Why am I deciding to do what I'm doing? And let me give you a little bit of background about my history and how I got to here, my why, my story. And some of you all have heard this, but 16 years ago, I was important. I was a director at Texas Children's Hospital and was just, I was certain I was going to be the next, CEO or something important, right? And we had this leadership development group that brought together some of the younger leaders of the hospital to essentially learn from the executives around the community who were, older and wiser, so to speak. And we had a president of Methodist Hospitals, incredible hospital here in Houston, longtime president, incredibly successful, who came in to speak to us. And he inspired me so much to be like him until I learned about what was going on in his personal life. Multiple marriages, kids who were estranged, health that was failing. I never saw him as a success again. I saw him as a sad circumstance and someone that I did not want to be like. And at that point, we were doing all this leadership development stuff. I made the decision that I wanted to become the best leader for my family as I could be. And if that meant I was going to be a great leader at a hospital, so be it. If it meant I wasn't going to be a great leader at my church, that's fine. Because I decided at that moment that I was going to be a leader of my family first. So that's what led me to this. And now 17 years later, I can tell you that it was the best decision, the best kind of mind shift that I've had. And I can't tell you how difficult it has been, but I absolutely would not change a thing about it. So that's my why. And I want to give you guys a little inspiration because the challenge will be out there. It's going to be difficult, but you can get through this and it's going to be amazing on the other side of it. Okay, I'm preaching now. I've been known to preach. Let's get now to the home learning plan. So now we have our why, and again, keep working on that why. It is not something that is built, is etched in stone. Keep tweaking on it as your children start to grow and develop. You're going to see them having some natural tendencies, and so your why may shift a little bit to bring out more of some of the things you're seeing in them. Maybe your home circumstance may change, and so that document is a moving document, okay? But it needs to be kept up front and center on your mirror so you do not forget about it. Now we're to the how. This is now how we're taking this why and starting to do and build the pieces that allow you to actually accomplish things of value. So the home learning plan, what it is and what it is not. It is a game plan, it is a strategy, and it's something that allows you to anticipate problems and then to deal with them before they come up and before they're hot. Frankly, part of the value of having so many people on a call like this is if we had more time and in subsequent conversations, we're going to actually all learn from each other. Some of the families and grandparents who are going to say, you know what, here's what you need to look out for as they're approaching middle school. Some of the older families with kids that may have disabilities. Here are some of the things that you need to think about if your child is disabled. So there's a lot of value and a lot of wisdom in community conversations. Unfortunately, we don't usually have that. So continuing. This home learning plan is not the Bible. And what I mean by that is it is not something that is fixed. It is not something that has a religious connotation that we just cannot let go of it. It is flexible. You got to make sure it's super flexible. It is also not a cudgel. That's a picture of a cudgel. It is not something that you beat your kids over the head with. We have this plan and we're going to do it every day regardless. No, the plan is a flexible document and it does not demand things of the child. There's a negotiation that happens with the child as they age up around the things of interest to them. Now, looking at the time. Okay, we got 15 minutes. Good, we're doing okay. we're not going to get through all this, and I didn't expect to, but this is, kind of phase one. The home learning plan has the how and the what. So how do you achieve any goal? How do you know your objective, defining your timeline, and assessing your situation? That's what we're going to do. We jump in right now. Can you guys give me a little bit of feedback? And I've heard some of this from some of y'all, but just because we've got some new people on the line here, what are some of the things and some of the challenges that you're facing with your child right now? Your quote unquote, your issues with dealing with your kids at home right now?
I'd say integrating the traditional school stuff that they have going on, and this might, I mean, my kids have kind of wrapped it up for the year, but it will be the case moving forward with what we want to do in the home to supplement that, like trying to get those things to mesh.
Yep, thank you. Integration, home and school. Yep. And by the way, y'all, there are active conversations right now about August being just as disrupted as we are right now. So whatever we're doing, this work that we're doing right now, this has a longer runway than we might want to admit. We're looking at least August, maybe even January before things start to return to some sense of normalcy. So whatever you're doing to build up your strength and your capacity to lead your kids at home is going to serve you well regardless of what happens with school. Other issues, thank you for that. Others.
I have an issue, well, two. The first one is attention, my kids are younger, so keeping their attention so that they can focus on what it is that they're assigned to do. And then the second thing is learning at different levels. So trying to teach at the same time, knowing one needs one thing, the other needs the other child needs something else.
That's right. And what are the ages real quick?
I have 3-year-old twins.
Oh, my goodness. Yes, twins. Yes, understood. Yeah, I've got a friend who's got triplets, and I think my hair started to fall out when I saw what they were dealing with. So, all right, thank you for that. So we all have these issues, and so what we have to do as part of our learning plan is we have to be really clear about an objective that will start to resolve some of these issues. So, and as we do that, there's 3 things that are in tension that we need to make sure we're clear about. And I think I just heard some of that from, actually it was in our breakout group, the idea that, well, we talked through this. There's 3 issues that we have to balance. The first is there are things that each child has to do. They have to do it because either it's a part of what we do as a family, it's a part of your role in taking care of the house, whatever it may be. There are things that you have to do. I put the washing dishes into this bucket, but it could also be something like reading, right, on an academic. Maybe it's, some element of homework. They have to do some of these things. Now, there's also the things that the child wants to do. And it may or may not be things that we support. Like the picture here is a video game, someone playing a video game. In our house, I don't play that, right? I don't work that way. So, but there are things that the child is going to want to do, and trying to find the balance between those and even integration between those is actually a really important conversation that we'll have at another time. But then there's a third bucket. And the third bucket is the things that the child doesn't even realize that they're passionate about. And these are the things that could become the child's just cause or their purpose or their passion, their why for being on this earth. And that conversation, that realization is unlikely to happen without some support, conversation, and coaching on the part of most likely you, the parent, okay? So these are the 3 things that are operating in tension that need to all happen on some periodic basis. Now that we know our why, now we need to start defining objectives. What types of things do we want to see happen? And before I do that, I'm going to go to another screen here because I want to make sure that expectations become really clear on some things. When we talk about objectives for our kids, some of you may have seen me do this graph before. It's called the 1% rule, and it's based on the writings of a guy named James Clear. He wrote a book called Atomic Habits, which I would recommend everyone buy today and devour.
Matt, can you move the thing so we can see it a little bit more?
Is that it? Can you see that better?
Thank you.
Yeah. So this rule is, this is how kids actually develop. you learn anything, this is what happens. There's a long period of time where you don't see any progress. So imagine trying to lose weight or learning a language or learning how to play a piano. You can dink on that piano for weeks and not see any progress, right? Likewise, losing weight. You might work out every day for 3 weeks and not see any change in that scale, right? But here's the problem. That's the reality. What we expect and what your kids often expect is this. That day one, there's going to be some fabulous improvement, right? And so what happened with kids coming home after, with Corona, we expected our kids to move from an environment where they were tightly managed at school, where they got 20, teacher has 20 kids in a classroom. They've got to manage those kids tightly or it'll be complete chaos, right? And that family, that child now comes into a home environment where there's very little management, and our expectation is on day one, they can sit in a chair for 3 hours as a kindergartner and do lessons, right? Entirely unrealistic, but that's actually where kind of our mindset has been around some of this stuff. Instead, we should be thinking like this. So our objectives are going to be somewhere up here. I want my child to integrate home and school. I want my child to keep attention and focus. Those are things that are going to take time to develop. This process here is what's called the 1% rule. We need to think about our children growing in 1% increments over time. Small growth. Because small growth that's done on a consistent basis will lead to incredible outcomes. I promise you, if everyone in this room agreed to walk around the block once a day for the next 3 months, a couple of things would happen. One, they would be able to walk many more miles because their body is starting to grow and strengthen, but it would be hard to document the time at which that you have moved from being kind of out of shape to in shape, right? It's not that clear. It is a slow progress. And if we're not careful, whatever objective we set for anyone is this. If we set the objective, but we put it over here, then we create this frustration on the part of you and your child. Child, why aren't you sitting still? You've been home for a week. You're not getting any homework done. You got 3 hours of work to do. Child is saying, he won't say this, but the reality is the child doesn't know how to do it. He's not been trained. He's not practiced sitting and doing work on their own. There's a whole other conversation too we could have about what is the child actually interested in? And that's a conversation that we'll get into in the next conversation that we'll have around what do we need to be doing with our child. So this is really important as we think about objectives for our children, that we do not set objectives that are too ambitious. And again, the key point here is we tend to overvalue what we can learn in the short term and undervalue what we can learn in the long term. Does that make sense? So right now, if I could wave a magic wand, I would tell all schools to stop sending any homework home. 0. And all that would happen would be small, student-led increments of reading and math. And we will talk about that again. We'll talk about that next time we connect. So, but make sure you remember this, because when we talk about objectives, a lot of folks get out of whack on that part of it. Okay, back to the presentation. So I have here 6 different examples of objectives that we might set up for a child. And I have different examples of ages as well. So I'll just pick one. Okay, let's do the one, because I heard this a little bit earlier in some of the conversations. We'll do the one in the middle on the bottom. It says the objective, we're assuming this is a 13-year-old boy, a child who excels in academics. Okay, let's say that's an objective. There's a whole conversation I think we would need to have about where's the child in this, but we'll cover that later. So if that is an objective, then there are going to be certain results that we're going to want to see. And so the next slide is really getting at that. And here, again, I don't want to overwhelm you with so many of these, but these are examples that I just put together. Some were kind of accurate with my kids and some were just kind of random. So here is an example of, let me shrink my head here so you guys can see this. Okay, so here are some examples of results that we might set as targets. But again, those targets are way out on that blue line up the curve a bit. Does that make sense? We're not going to set a result and expect it to happen overnight. We're going to set a result and say, okay, here is where I'm hoping to be in 2, 3, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 2 months, wherever it may be. All right? So go ahead and take a look at that. I'm going to pause here. Talk to me about questions that you might have related to this.
Matt, I don't know if this is actually related or not, but I know in a previous session you had talked about micro habits, and I know that there are a couple of new people on the line that could benefit from those, especially with all age kids, but especially I know personally with the younger kids,
Yes.
how that happens, how you get them to do it. If you have time to go over that, that would be great.
Yeah, so here's what since we're almost done for the day, so here's, thank you for that, Marna. And what I think we'll do is we're just going to pause right here, okay? And we will come back to it in a subsequent conversation. But right now, because I think, frankly, if we got into too much of that right now, I think it would overwhelm folks. So Marna brought up a really important point, something called micro habits. Let's pick an example. Let's say I want my child to, oh, you know what, here's one that everyone will appreciate. What happens if your child brushes their teeth once a month? Just once a month. You guys know the answer to this, right?
Well, a mouthful of cavities.
Exactly, that's right. Mouthful of cavities, a complete wreck. We know that. So therefore, when the children are young, we get them a toothbrush. And what do we do first? First, we hold the brush and we brush with them, right? Then we put their hand around the brush handle and our hand around theirs, and we do it as well. And then we watch to see if they do that. And then we continue to slowly build, but at each step, we're trying to build a habit. And because once the habit is established, guess what? We don't have to ask them, do they brush their teeth? So at some point, we're going to turn that responsibility over to the child, and it'll be their job to brush their teeth every day. Our job will be to make sure they do it until the habit is firmly established. And once it's established, I don't need to ask that question anymore. So a micro habit are these very small pieces that, that build this larger habit. And again, I'm seeing a couple of comments from folks on the line, and I'm going to just bring one up on the screen real quick to show, because it is a really good point. Right here. So Scott mentioned the idea of starting in, the suggestion is to start small in terms of your desired results. Incrementalism tells us that self-directed learners begin with small steps, then move to bigger steps. Absolutely right. So the idea about micro habits is we're building small habits that then become more pronounced over time. I'll tell you one thing we're doing with my daughter right now. She wanted to start running. Here's what we did. We gave her something called the 2-minute rule. Every day, every single day, she needs to run for 2 minutes. 1 minute away from the house, 1 minute back. That's it. Now she can run for 2 miles. She'd come and run with me for 2 miles before, no problems. But what we're trying to do is establish a habit. Because once the habit happens, once 2 minutes becomes just easy, and she's used to getting her socks and shoes on, and right, then she can now go to 3 minutes or 4 minutes. And as that grows, at some point in the next couple weeks or months, she will absolutely be running farther than me. Absolutely, because she's already in shape, but she's going to have the habit in place to do that without resistance and without friction. Does that make sense? That is the same thing that we need to establish, whether it's how our child reads at home, whether it's how our child cleans up after themselves. And so this idea of objectives is we decide on one. And then we build the framework to create the micro habits to make sure that that child achieves that objective. And to Scott's point, once that child achieves that objective, two things happen. One, the child starts to get some positive reinforcement because they can see that they're making progress. And then you, parent, you start to go, oh my gosh, I can actually lead my kid. I can actually support their learning and growth going forward. So that's a really incredible opportunity. Another point here, a couple of folks were asking, do we have access to the webinars from previous weeks? I am in the process of processing those right now and editing them down, and I will put them on the web and send an email out to everyone regarding that. Another question or comment was the idea of having your children participate in the development of these objectives. Again, my daughter, she said that she wants to become more fit. And so we then negotiated about how to do that. So absolutely, we have got to make sure that our kids are in the process of developing these objectives. That will be the conversation for the next time. We're out of time at this point. So let me do this. First, parents, grandparents, thank you for being here. You guys are investing time in trying to improve your own leadership. That warms my heart, but it also reminds me that there are thousands and thousands and thousands of parents just like you who want the best for their kids and grandkids. And frankly, we have rarely given parents the type of leadership support necessary to build their capacities. If you think this was a valuable use of your time, then I hope that you can join us next week, same time, same place. You can use the same login information, or you can go in and register again. I'll send an email out to invite folks to do it. But we're going to conclude now, and I'll put these videos online as soon as I can so you can work through other conversations. So I hope that was helpful. And my name is Matt Barnes, and this is The Education Game. And thank you for being here. We'll see you next week.